Hey guys, it's Tom with Watchman River. I got a question for you guys that I want to ask you, but first, I'm going to go to 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. But know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power, and from such people turn away. Wow. It's like reading the news today, isn't it? It's been like this a while, man. This is just exactly how mankind is now. Exactly. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Oh my goodness, I see that in the comments every day. Every day I see a comment that says, oh, you've been saying this forever. You guys have been saying this for 2,000 years. Incredible to be living in the end times, the last days. And here's my question, because this channel, you know, is a little more laid back, a little more intimate. Not as many people are watching. I'm not on a timer with sharing news and testimonies and stuff, so it's a little more relaxed. But here's my question for you guys. When did you realize we're in the last days? Is this a more recent thing for you? And I think sometimes it depends on how long you belong to the Lord, how long you've walked with the Lord. But is this a relatively new thing, or have you believed this for a long time? And I want to ask you that question because I've had a different couple times in my life where I've literally thought this is a key moment in life and everything's going to change from this moment on. On the morning of 9/11, I don't think I've ever told this story, but just where I was when 9/11 happened. I live about a 90-minute drive, if there's no traffic, from New York City, from where I am. And on the morning of 9/11, I was sitting there on my computer, and I saw this, like, on the computer, I saw like a sum up of the news stories. And the second I turned the computer on, I kind of looked and I saw one of the twin towers with a hole in it and fire coming out. And my immediate thought was, that's not funny. Like, before I even looked at the news story, somehow I thought it was like some Photoshop image or something. But my first thought was like, what's that? That's not funny. And then I read the headline and clicked into it. And it was in between the time that the plane hit the first tower and then the other one hit the second tower, because I ran down. I had neighbors. I was living in a 2-family house, and I ran down to the first floor to the neighbors there who were also believers. And I said, have you guys heard what's happening? And they said, no. And I said, turn the TV on. So they turned the TV on. And this moment they turned the TV on, they said that the second plane had hit the second tower. And I'm not going to get into all the theories about what happened that day, because no matter what you think, I don't know if we'll ever know exactly what happened that day. But I remember saying to them at that moment, I said, do you guys realize life will never be the same again? And they understood. And I said, they're going to use this to take our freedoms. I don't know why I thought that was my first response, but I thought this is major. Like, life's never going to be the same. And it never was. I mean, I'll talk to young people who, my 27-year-old daughter was only 3 to 4 when that happened. And I remember just thinking at that time, like, she's never going to remember a world pre 9/11. And she doesn't, and there was something that we lost that day hugely in our freedoms, and I'll tell my kids now, they just can't. I said, we'll go to an airport. And I said, we used to just walk up to the gate and wait for the people to come off to give them a hug. And they're like, there was no security checkpoints? And no, We walk in the airport. I think we walked through a metal detector, but there was no, TSA and stuff. So, life changed majorly. But I remember at that time thinking, we're getting closer to the last days, the end times. When that happened, I thought life's never going to be the same again. And when I actually talked to one of my best friends for 2 hours about the Lord once, he was an unbeliever. That had just happened. And I said, what's coming is going to make that look mild in comparison to what's coming to this world. I'll never forget saying that to him. But then the next turning point was the pandemic. When that hit, I remember thinking that was the first time I truly thought, okay, now the end days aren't many years away. Now we're there. That was huge. Just because all of a sudden, for the first time, every problem seems to affect the entire world, right? Since the pandemic, we watched the entire world get locked down. And that was a huge turning point. And I know that many of your testimonies revolve around that time period. I think it was a huge wake-up call to people that weren't walking with the Lord closely. And I think a lot of people came to know the Lord because all of a sudden it's like, I can't really trust this world. I can't trust all the leaders in this world. There's something nefarious going on. And we learned a lot through that. But I remember that was the moment where I was like, okay, Lord, we're in the very last days. I got to get more serious with you. I got to walk with you. And that kind of coincided with when my Lyme disease started. It started about a year before the pandemic. So I was already sitting down watching a lot of teaching, good teaching. And remember just thinking like this is a major turning point when that happened. But you guys, do you feel that way? What do you think? When did you realize we're in the last days? Because now I'm so much more surprised when people don't realize we're in the last days than when I assume everyone realizes we're in the very last days. But when I meet somebody who's like, nah, I think the rapture's 300 years from now. It's like, whoa, and I always say the same thing. We're going to be toast by then. Like, they're threatening nuclear war right now. How do you see 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now? They're threatening them right now. And we've never seen this before. And it's like, I always tell you guys, we'll be more toasted than a marshmallow at the s'mores convention if we're here much longer. That's why I think we're not here much longer. But, those two moments in my life were the biggest life will never be the same again, was 9/11. And then, 20 years later, the pandemic. Huge turning point. Huge turning point. I'd love to know what you guys think. I do know one thing. We are in the very last days. The things I'm seeing now are just incredible. Only things we talked about that we couldn't even get a grip of what it meant when we would talk about different things. In the 80s and 90s, talking about the last days and, a one world monetary system. What did that mean? Before the days of digital stuff, we had credit cards, but nobody used them, for just any purchase. I remember the first time I saw somebody use a credit card to buy a coffee. And I was like, really? Yeah, it was when people first started doing that. I'm like, really? Like, you're going to pull out your credit card to get a coffee for, back then the coffee was like $1.80 or something. I'm like, for $1.80 purchase, you're going to use your card? Yeah. And all of a sudden I was doing it not too long after that. But yeah, just different days. These last days are they're wild. We would just think about these things like how, what's the technology for the mark of the beast? What is it going to be like? Had no clue how it was going to come about. Now we look at it and go, oh yeah, all the technology's there. You can see that happening. Not to mention every other thing. It's all there. Everything's there. I always tell you guys, and I really believe it. I feel like we're sitting here, we're spreading the gospel, and we're waiting for the rapture. We're waiting for it. It's the next event on the prophetic calendar, in my opinion. I'm not waiting for anything else. Some people said in my main channel's video the other day, they said, well, one thing is false Christs appearing and fooling many. And, that hasn't happened yet. I'm like, Do you know who Joseph Smith is? Do you guys ever hear of the Mormon Church? They fooled millions with new doctrine. Jehovah's Witnesses, Reverend Moon, these all started like 150 years ago. And there will be many more, I believe. I believe during the tribulation, when we're gone, there's going to be many people that are saying, look here, look there, look at this guy. But just something to think about. I'd love to know what you guys think. This channel's more of a, to me, it's more of, there's a lot less comments. I can kind of go through them a little more. But I'd love to know what you think. I love you guys.